Okay, joining us now, Chairman of the Armed Services Committee, Republican Senator John McCain of Arizona. Senator, thanks for being with us on Morning Joe.
Thank you, Mika.
Does Donald Trump owe you an apology?
No, I don't think so, but I think he may owe an apology to the families of those who have sacrificed in conflict and those who have undergone the prison experience in serving their country. I'm in the arena, as TR used to say, but in the case of many of our veterans, when Mr. Trump said that he prefers to be with people who are not captured, well, the great honor of my life was to serve in the company of heroes. I'm not a hero, but those who were my senior ranking officers, people like Colonel Bud Day, Congressional Medal of Honor winner, and those that inspired us to do things that we otherwise wouldn't have been capable of doing. Those are the people that I think he owes an apology to. And,
Senator, we are joined by viewers of Today as well, and Joe Scarborough has a question for you. Joe.
You bring up a man who was a hero of mine, Colonel Bud Day, an early supporter from Fort Walton Beach. We talked about what a great man he was, but I remember Bud participating in a 2004 Swift Vet commercial against Senator John Kerry and questioning his military service. It pained me when Bud and a lot of other American heroes did that. Shouldn't we just keep our war heroes' military records off the political tables once and for all?
I think so, Joe. And by the way, I did strongly condemn those ads.
You did?
Oh, yeah. John Kerry and I have had differences over the years. We have worked together on some issues like normalization of relations with Vietnam. But I think the point here is that there are so many men and some women who served and sacrificed and happened to be held prisoner, and somehow to denigrate that in any way, their service, I think, is offensive to most of our veterans. I just like, there's Lieutenant John Pettivillano, who was shot down during World War II. He's 92 years old. He came to my office thanks to the Air Force. We gave him one of his long overdue decorations. 92 years old, blind, wept when we gave him that award. He was a prisoner and was 90 pounds when he left, when Patton's Tank Corps liberated the prison camp he was in. Those are the people that, frankly, that I find it just totally inappropriate for Mr. Trump to say that he doesn't like to be with people who are captured.
Well, Senator, so you certainly are taking the high road and not making this about you. You're right. You're in the arena. A lot of ugly things are said about people in the arena day in and day out. But talk about how you personally feel when you have someone who avoided the military draft to go fight in Vietnam, criticizing you for making the decision to go, and then when your connections could have gotten you out of active torture, you chose not to take that route, but to stay with your buddies until they all got out.
I think you are old enough to remember the controversies and the wounds of the Vietnam War. Might have been the only war that you and I ever knew much about where the veterans were not welcomed home. And that's why I work so hard on the normalization of relations between our two countries, full accounting for those who are missing in action. In other words, put this behind us and move forward. And now we have a good relationship with Vietnam. They've still got a long way to go.
But what about Donald Trump, though? Are you not resentful that a guy that didn't serve in Vietnam is criticizing someone like yourself who still is paying the price day in and day out for what you did and what you endured while in prison camp?
Joe, I've put all that behind me. For me to look back in anger at anyone is non-productive, and our country was divided in an almost unprecedented fashion during the Vietnam War. And when I came home, I was shocked And so I've worked ever since to try to heal those wounds. I spend time with veterans. I do everything I can to help them. As you know, there are major scandals going on. I had 2 pieces of legislation to try to help that issue and the suicide rate, which is so high. The best thing to do is put it behind us and move forward and just express our gratitude to those who have served and sacrificed. Who are the real heroes? They're the 55,000 names that are down on the wall, engraved in black granite, that I stop by sometimes early in the morning and when the sun's going down. And I was 4th of July with the men and women who are serving in Afghanistan, and I can tell you they are just wonderful, better than my generation.
Can I ask you one final thing and then pass it on to Willie? Donald Trump keeps, you can tell that you got under his skin when you called his supporters crazies. Do you regret doing that?
Oh, listen, you know my state is a very dynamic and divisive state, and we've got lots of arguments and lots of debates going on. I have hundreds of town hall meetings all over Arizona, and I'm called crazy by the people that come there. I thought it was a term of endearment.
Willie Guys.
Okay, so no apology for that.
Oh, listen, I love the debate, and I love my people, and so I meant it in a way that, in a term of affection, to be honest with you.
Senator McCain, the Republican candidates came out almost unanimously condemning these comments from Donald Trump on Saturday. Some say he should even get out of the race. Do you feel like Donald Trump should abandon his bid for the presidency because of what he said about you?
No, I think that's a decision that he would have to make. Again, what I think he should do is apologize to the families and those who have served, the people like John Pedovellino, who served and they were the proudest moments of their lives was serving in the company of heroes, and those are the people that he should apologize to.
What do you think it says about your party, or how do you account for the fact that Donald Trump, at least in this moment in time, is at the top of most polls in the race for the White House? Well,
I'll be interested to see, one, how that number is after these comments of his, but I can assure you, if you talk to our veterans, and I've had a flood of calls from our veterans, they are not happy.
I'd like to ask you about Iran and the nuclear deal that was cut. I guess there's one school of thought that Iran is not capable of change, so how can you cut a deal with Iran? Do you think the deal is going to make it through Congress, and what are the ramifications if it does not?
I think it's not going to get through the first round, as you know, but the president's already said he would veto, and then the question is, there sufficient votes to override a veto? I think that'll be dictated to some degree about the debate and how people are convinced or not convinced that this is not a good deal or a good deal.
Is it a good deal? Are there parts of it that are a good deal? Does it make the Middle East safer in any way?
I worry that it's going to nuclearize the Middle East. I've already talked to some of the leaders in the Middle East. They are deeply concerned. They will be moved in the direction of acquiring nuclear weapons because they see this 5-year, 8-year, 10-year window that they're going to have to, as Iran acquires nuclear weapons after 10 years. But the other thing that's worrisome and really disturbing to me is when you give a promise to relieve the sanctions on Soleimani, the guy that sent in thousands of copper-tipped IEDs, General Dunford the other day said that the copper-tipped IEDs killed at least 500 Army and Marines, and they're lifting the sanctions against him. Someone's going to have to explain that to me.
Joe.
No, that was one of the most, to see his name on that list, Senator, you're exactly right. That was stunning. It was also stunning to see that the Iranians have a 24-day lead time before inspectors are allowed in. What can be done to shorten that time frame? Is there anything that you can do or members of the Senate can do, or is it a take it or leave it situation?
I think it's almost a take it or leave it, Joe, because of it's a, quote, agreement. But I also think we should be deeply concerned about continued Iranian aggression. They're now in control in 4 countries. We just found out when I was in Afghanistan over the 4th of July, they're now providing weapons to the Taliban. Everywhere they are on the move, and they are succeeding, and they're still the chief state sponsor of terror. Now, I understand the other argument, Nixon to China, but when you look at the circumstances of Nixon to China, they are vastly different than the situation today.
Senator McCain, you've had a long relationship, obviously, with John Kerry. Known him for years and years. He actually leapt to your defense in a very strong way yesterday in light of these Donald Trump comments. But do you feel like he did all he could do at the negotiating table with Iran, or do you feel like maybe he should have walked away from this?
Well, I think there was very little doubt in the Iranians' mind that we wanted it more than they did, and that's how you got somehow an agreement on conventional weapons crept into this when Secretary Kerry had assured us time after time after time that this was only nuclear. And, of course, the great concern that all of us have is what is Iran going to do with those tens of billions of dollars that are now going to be freed up? So I'll look forward to the debate. I'll look forward to the briefings. We're going to have one next week, or this week, in the Senate. But frankly, I'm on the side of Bibi.
Okay. I'm not going to challenge you on that because we don't have enough time. But I do want to ask you about 11,000 people showing up in Arizona for Bernie Sanders. What do you make of his candidacy?
As I just mentioned to you, we're a very diverse state. We have every political philosophy that you could know. I love it. It makes for the great debate and the great discussions we have. But it also means that just frankly, as Donald Trump had tapped a vein in the Republican Party, the fact is that Bernie has also with the Democratic Party. And by the way, he and I negotiated very tough negotiations on a bill to reform the VA. And I will say this, we are philosophically different, but Bernie was an honest man.
So what was he like to work with? Negotiate
Explosive.
with. Explosive.
But I'm
tough.
Always the most mild-mannered.
I know, really. This is from
Between the two of us, we had.
That must have been fun.
We had wonderful shouting matches, but we were both dedicated to the proposal that we have to fix the scandal in our VA. It has to be fixed.
All right, Senator John McCain, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you being here exclusively on Morning.